Welcome to Cooking with Jim.
Well, baking with Jim and Gina. We found this great little recipe online. It's called Jiffy Cinnamon Rolls, and it's probably the easiest recipe I've ever come across for making homemade cinnamon rolls. And no yeast, it's just baking powder. And in literally less than 30 minutes you can have some delicious cinnamon rolls coming out of the oven. So you start with, you're going to make your paste first in your little mixer. And it's just a third of a cup of brown sugar, a third of a cup of butter, a cup of brown sugar, and 3 teaspoons of cinnamon. You can, depending on how much cinnamon you like after you've made your first batch, if you don't like, if it's too strong, you can put less cinnamon in it. And if you want some other spices in there to change up the flavor, you can certainly do that. But if you just want regular cinnamon rolls, just dump that in. So while that's mixing, that's going to form the paste for 2 parts of the cinnamon roll. You're going to put about a teaspoon in the bottom of the pans, and then the rest of it is going to form your paste for your dough. So the trick with your dough is you want it to be nice and fluffy, and it's almost like making a pie dough, where you have your flour and your other little ingredients like your salt and sugar and in this case baking powder. And then you're going to put in your butter. You want your butter to be cold, and you want to incorporate it with the flour so that you end up with little tiny pieces of butter incorporated throughout all the flour, so that when the dough comes together, you have these little tiny pieces of butter all throughout your dough. So when it goes in the oven, the butter melts and you have all these little pockets in the dough. And that's what gives you your nice flaky texture. So we're going to make the dough now. In here I got 2 cups of flour, there's 2 tablespoons of white sugar, there's 4 teaspoons of baking powder, and a teaspoon of salt, and that's all just for the stirred up. You can use a sifter if you want, but that's all I do there. So now what we need is 1/4 of a cup of cold butter, a cup of cold milk, and the recipe calls if you want to throw in some currants, if you want to throw in some raisins, you can do that after as well. We're just going to add the butter and the milk. So 1/4 cup is half of one of these. We need some milk. Doesn't matter what kind of milk. We drink skim milk, so that's what I'm going to use here. So you want to use 2% or 1% or whole milk, whatever works for you. Now the thing about milk is the higher the fat content, the richer your dough is going to be. I mean, you could, if you had no milk but you had whipped cream, you could mix your whipped cream and water. That'll do it. Or you can use buttermilk. So you can even experiment with taking away some of the liquid and putting in like sour cream or yogurt. Experiment with any of that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate the butter. And ideally, this is where you're going to work quick to get this dough formed, rolled out, and the cinnamon rolls made and in the oven. Speaking of oven, what's the temperature for that? We're going to bake these 400.
Check inside.
So it's going to be ready by the time we're done. Now, you may want to get your hands in there and go like this to crumble the butter, but the warmth from your hands will soften the butter. So I just use a fork. I mean, you could even, if your flour was in like a cold area, to bring down if the flour was really cold, you could get it with your hands and do this. But this is just as quick. So I'm just going to stir that around now, looking for little lumps. This is about ready now. So I'm going to add a cup of water.
Milk.
Cup of milk, sorry. Where a lot of people seem to have trouble making their dough, and you just want to stir the flour enough to get all the liquid in there, and then you can start making your dough like this. Now this is almost ready. See, when I touch that dough, it's nice and cold, and that's exactly what you want. Just from the cold milk and the cold butter, it's just at the right temperature. And the dough is spongy, which means that the baking powder is working right away, so you want to do this as quick as possible. So I'm just going to kind of shake this into a square. This recipe is going to make 12. If you don't have a rolling pin, no big deal. Just use the knuckles and you can flatten it out like that. If you have a rolling pin, you're just going to do a little bit like this. Now if you can get in close, you can see with the camera. It's a little yellow here and a little yellow there. You can see the little pockets of butter, and that's exactly what you want. Because when that melts, it's going to make the dough right nice and it pulls apart beautifully. So that's big enough, I think. This paste is perfect. Just soft enough. I left this out for a little bit so the margarine was warm, up to room temperature. I've done it too cold, so it works. So you're going to want a teaspoon in each one. You can use standard muffin pans, you can use a cookie sheet and put your cinnamon rolls together. You can use the old-fashioned metal muffin tins. You can use a glass baking dish. all those types of bakeware, you're going to want to put some grease on or spray some stuff in to keep the cinnamon rolls from sticking. These are no stick, which is what I like about them. So I'm going to try and spread it all at once, just a little bit at a time. Even that little bit of time that dough has been sitting on the table, the baking powder is working. So it's making it a little difficult to spread this without tearing the dough. Actually, it's making it quite difficult. But we'll get it done. Okay. Make sure the end pieces have some cinnamon. Okay. So, tuck and roll, like a jelly roll. So you want 12 pieces, just go, that's your 6, you get 3. And put them right on top of your teaspoon of paste. Some say put the pieces cut side down, cut side up. Doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Okay. So we're just waiting for our oven to finish heating. Once it does, they'll go in the oven for 20 minutes at 400 degrees, and it will be time to put on the kettle. 20 minutes is up, and these are done. So. So these are done. They could have come out a minute sooner, or if you like them really dark, you can go a little longer, another minute longer. I wouldn't go any longer than 20 minutes at 400, and that's 400 on this oven. Your oven might be different. We're going to give these about 10 minutes to cool, then we're going to flip them out, and we eat them like this. But you can put icing on top of them again if you want, or a thin glaze, or a flavored glaze that goes well with cinnamon, like apple glaze or something like that. But you can just kind of see in the dough here where it's kind of like it breaks away here and here and down into here. That's all those little tiny bits of butter that have created the little pockets and melted away, and that's what's going to it's going to break apart in your hands, and then it's going to melt in your mouth. So 10 minutes from now. Alright, time to flip these suckers out. So it's just as simple as doing that. The last time I made these, all this good stuff, we'll call it, it's just the paste. It kind of has like a candy texture to it. it usually gets stuck in the bottom of this pan, so not sure why it's different this time, but it just made them easy to come out. Perfect. So now we're going to turn them over. Like that. If coming out of the pan, if these were like kind of tacky or something like that, I'd say wait for these to cool and then flip them out over. Otherwise, when they cool, they'll stick to the pans, but these seem to be okay. Kettle is on, so we can just tear one of these open. So that's going to be delicious. Not bad. About 30 minutes, 35 minutes ago we started. Fresh cinnamon rolls. Coffee's on. Time for a break.